Hello and welcome to DDOCast, episode 605, recorded live on Saturday, July 18th. I'm your host, Patrick. With me this week, we have coming back to the show, Samius Gurobo.
Hey, greetings and salutations.
And we also have Arkat.
Good morning, everybody.
Yeah, it is a good morning. Hope the weather's nice where you're at. I believe most of the U.S. is getting some nice heat today. We were actually talking about it a little bit before the show. Here in Seattle, we're up to a very comfortable about 73 or 4 degrees. So it's
Oh, wow, that sounds really nice.
doesn't it though?
Yeah, we're going to get up to like 90 today and not looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of folks. I think this is totally off topic. I think I saw something like 20 some odd states are under heat watch warnings the next couple of days. So hey, go outside, enjoy the sun, be safe, be respectful, stay 6 feet apart. Let's see. This week's screenshot. The Dwarven Ranger Rocknall Rockseeker is in the land of the Owlbearer with his defender and a tamed Owlbear and the Stormhorns in the 472nd screenshot of the week. Thanks, Rocknall, for sending in this week's screenshot. Hey, it's going to be up to 500 here before too long. We like to talk about Dungeons & Dragons online nearly every weekend. You can catch us through Twitch, YouTube, the DDO forums, iTunes, or from our website, DDOcast.com. DDOcast is hosted by CyberAirs, the awesome podcast hosting network, and shows are usually available within a few days of recording. The next show will probably be next weekend. I know I said that 2 weeks ago, and then we skipped a week because there was literally no news at all. There wasn't even a chronicle last week.
Yeah, oops, I guess Jerry forgot or
I think he was
something.
on vacation or took
Well, he
some
was on
days off,
vacation, but
that kind of thing. So, and that's pretty typical. If he's on vacation, that's not something that usually gets picked up by somebody else. I don't even know if they posted the sales on the forums last week.
they didn't.
think
Some folks had to put it together and post it. You know, some players had to do it.
Yeah, it was on the Twitter, which is something, of course, that you can program ahead. So, it was a slow news week, which I think hopefully means that we're getting close to some juicy news, which we'll kind of get into what we do know, and we'll theorize a little bit. Anyways, on the podcast this week, so we do have a little bit of news. We'll talk about that, we did have a Chronicle this week, so we'll talk about that. We're going to start a series, probably 2, maybe 3 parts. We'll kind of see how it goes today. Talking about gearing up. And this came from a question from a listener that was kind of along the lines of, hey, coming out of our new returning player episode a couple weeks ago, about a month ago now, kind of talking about, hey, talk about gearing up. Like, what do you have? What do you recommend for getting gear? And I thought, hey, that's more than I could just like give a short answer. This sounds like a great show topic, so that's what we're doing. I'm going to start this week. But of course, gearing up, and we'll talk about this. You know, it's not just for new and returning players. It's a constant thing that even people like myself and Samius and Arkat, who've been around for ever. You know, that's something that we have to go through frequently as well, and we'll kind of get into that.
Yeah, it's one of the legs of DDO, right?
Yeah,
that's the main thing to think about is if DDO has different legs that it stands on, gearing is definitely one of the major legs.
right.
So it's always a thing.
But we'll start with game news because we did have a little bit. We have a few things to talk about this week. Starting with a little bit of news, more of a tease on the Augment Pass. Linabelle posted on the forums that we generally. So someone was saying, "Hey, like, give us some new augments. Like, we know you're gonna revamp the system at some point, but can we maybe get some new augments in the interim?" Linabelle said, "We generally cannot do that until a pass of the base implementation of augments is completed. It's my understanding that each new augment adds complexity to the system as a whole, which has increasingly large bad implications on gameplay. As we've said multiple times, we have an augment system pass planned that we will get to eventually, just like we did with random loot, but until that happens, we will not be releasing any new augments." So, sad face, no new augments, because I like the augment system. I think it's a huge, great part. We're talking about gearing up. You know, there's a lot of opportunity there for, pardon the pun, augmenting your gear set. Because there's a lot of things that have augment slots, but outside of a few, you know, it's not. A lot of the, like, in particular, the diamonds are really outdated. The stat ones, most obviously, very outdated. So there's some low hanging fruit there that would be great to get in there. You know, there's in random loot. I'm not exactly sure how long they were kind of talking about that. But I think it's at least kind of an indicator that this is probably something that is at least a year away. Kind of what I'm reading between the lines there.
Yeah, it seems to me that it should be a higher priority than that. I don't think it is. At the very least, not necessarily making new augments, but revising the levels on the existing augments. They just spend all this time and energy in creating these really great double augmented slotted items in the random loot gen.
Yep.
And especially for those of us like are over on the hardcore server and stuff like that, trying to piece stuff together. And it just feels like, well, there's nothing to stick in these augments anyway, so I'll just keep it, put it in the bank, wait for it to go back to live, and maybe I'll be able to use them, you know, at level 20 or whatever. So it's a real disadvantage for that kind of stuff. Plus, I think, especially again with the hardcore server and new people leveling up, it would be a good income generator, because so often you're like, man, I really wish I could just cram spell power into my gear, you know, or spell side or whatever it's called. And you like look it up, you're like, oh sweet, I can get plus 11 at level 20.
Yeah, right. Like the
Or
striding, like one of my biggest bones of contention is the striding 30% augment is minimum level 20.
Yeah.
or you can't find a spot item or a spot
Yeah.
thing. Like, it's one of the most important things for the hardcore. And I realize that I've been hardcoring really hard again this new season, so a lot of my focus will come back, and a lot of my point of view will probably come back to hardcore. So like putting spot on something is really important, but
Mhm.
you just can't get it, and you can't get it at a reasonable level. So some low hanging fruit there, like at changing minimum levels at the very least should take an hour and could potentially generate significant income in the short term.
Yeah,
So I'm hoping that they'll revise that.
I think it's a really good point, right? Because we know that they can do that, like, do some work on minimum level, because they just did that on one that was buggy, a couple that were buggy. I guess it could potentially like snowball and do some things, but you know, I will say as a the one that is worth mentioning that is really nice is Heavy Fort is only minimum level 8.
Yeah, that's nice.
And I believe you can get that for 6 shards at the collectibles guy who is behind the House J kind of headquarter building by Dolores. Might be 8 shards, something like that. But relatively speaking, very cheap. If you're over on hardcore, very handy.
That one's also just available in the DDO store as well.
Yeah. Although it is, I think if you're comparing like price point between shards and points, it's a lot cheaper to buy it through the shard guy. Because it is really cheap in terms of that.
I feel like it's like 75 DDO points. So I'm not exactly sure at the shard transfer rate.
Yeah, I'm not either. And also, if you just don't want to spend points on it, you know, you might be able to get a couple of shards through the monster manual, and then kind of shard exchange. Then you've got some shards to buy an augment. I will say though that before we move on from augments, the one thing I would really like to see them come back to is the augments that were introduced and then phased out with Devil Assault, which were these kind of combination red slot ones that were timed out. I think that was kind of an interesting thing, and I'd like to see maybe that come back. You know, these really kind of nicer ones, but with a time limit. That might be kind of fun. Also, would be interesting to see if how well that kind of a concept would play with filigrees. if like here's a nice filigree, but it times out uh, as you quest with it, that could be interesting too. So
Definitely more income generating. I want to sort of piggyback onto what Samius was saying about income generation. And I totally agree. There's a lot of low hanging fruit out there that, that I think, and at least in my opinion, and evidently in Samius's opinion too, like maybe lower some of the magic levels for a lot of these things and make them available to lower level characters, and would be especially attractive and on hardcore. These guys are there. It's a company. They need to make money, but I mean, it seems like it seems like they're not doing enough to make money. Honestly, uh, another example would be the what do you call it boxes, the wishes of inheritance. Or even better, the +2 racial tomes. I
yeah,
mean, there are people that are constantly on the forums crying out for the racial tome, +2 racial tomes, and
that
you
was
know,
on sale once.
it was one time, and
Yeah.
the wishes of inheritance was one time, but that was fairly recent. The
Not as
Tancer's
recent as you
weapon
think though.
boxes.
The Wishes of Inheritance were last Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
that's
pretty recent. I mean,
sure.
it wasn't 2 years ago, but I
That's
mean,
true.
but the price points were just so ridiculously high that I just can't believe that it was a particularly popular item. But if they reduced those to like 995 points, I think they would sell like hotcakes. The +2 racial tomes for sure would sell. If it was
I
the
mean,
if
those
I
sold
don't
at the
remember what
price
the
point they
prices
had.
were.
The
Yeah,
the
so
price
I
point they
mean,
had for that was pretty reasonable, I think. So
yeah. So there's a lot of ways they can still generate income. I have a feeling they've got some sort of a theory where if you have them only like once a year, or if you have them rarely, you tend to generate more income because there's a perception of rarity and people want to just jump on them as soon as they can, kind of thing. But they seem to have autos boxes for sale, 4 or 5 times a year, and I
sure.
imagine they generate quite a bit of income, and they're like 5,000 well 499 or 95 turbine points. So I mean, these are
DDO points.
items that are, yeah. Oh, sorry, DDO
I
points.
still do it
Uh,
too.
yeah, there's got to be a lot of things out there that they can sell if they have them in the store, either
Yeah.
permanently or at least more often. It just boggles my mind that there's a way for them to make money, but they don't. But
Yeah.
and people are willing to hand them money, but they're just not willing to take it.
Yeah.
It's frustrating to a lot of folks. I can just tell.
The theory kind of that you're kind of talking about, like what's the theory behind that? The I can see a little bit of a in the line of with tomes, right? Like there's a diminishing return value in that you're only going to buy this tome once for a character, whereas auto boxes you buy frequently for like. Yes, there was a point in time in which that you wouldn't maybe buy autos boxes. I mean, there's only so many past lives, but I mean, we know people that don't need past lives that still reincarnate with some regularity and use auto boxes. So
Sure.
there's kind of I think there's a bit of a, a mixed bag of comparison there. But yeah, like the wish of inheritance, I see why there's like that. I think is a very difficult item in a theory, right? Like how often if you have it too available, does it break the mechanics of and the value of raiding with different characters? Uh, and I don't know that that's true, but I can see why there's a concern there.
So my wife and I talked about that specifically last night on the way to dinner,
Oh,
and
interesting.
it seems like a lot of people um, have just one character at 30, so that's their raid character. All their other characters, or not all, but many of their other characters are on the TR chain. So if it doesn't make any, if all these other characters are not going to be raiding, what's the their concern about not other characters rating is really not a. I mean, they're making it. They're making them not rating because of their TR, their TR mechanic. So if they're afraid of having the what do you call it, the wishes of inheritance out there, and that they won't sell because they're going to discourage people from all different kinds of characters from rating, then that's a problem of their own making. And they I think they honestly they should be in the store because people are always going to rate it, maybe with the same tune, but they're always going to rate, and they're going to want to move bound to character items to their
Right.
other to their other characters. So I
You don't
I,
buy
s- I
into
s-
the
I
idea that
see
it's
what,
going to kill rating.
no, I don't buy that at all.
I don't think I do either. And there's certainly, you talk about that kind of same theory. Well, you've got the raid runes that you can turn in anyways.
Right.
Um, so I don't know that that's necessarily a major concern. I don't think they should be in the store all the time, but I think with more regularity that would be kind of nice. I think what could this game look like if look at Otto's boxes, the wishes of inheritance, maybe like the various tomes that only show up for a little bit. What could it look like if every other week there was a limited time item on sale and you kind of went through a rotation of that, similar to um, like the bonus days or the
Right.
store sales, something like that. And maybe come up with some other things that are limited time that maybe you want to kind of highlight. And I think you get a lot of mileage out of that.
Sure, if you did it consistently
Yeah.
and I think predictably would be nice. I mean, obviously you would come up with new things. You would insert it into the schedule, so it would tend to space. The autos boxes would get spaced further out. If because of all the new things that you add over time. But it would be nice if they had them regularly and you could count on them being there. Um, I think it
Yeah.
would be better, and like I said, better price points for some of the things.
Is there like there's the traveler's box, which we haven't seen in a while.
Right.
There was what's the weapon box?
The Tensors,
Is that what
Tensors weapon
Tensor's
box.
box? Yeah.
That's the one with all the sentient experience
Right.
in it.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
there's another one that you could like we haven't seen those in a long time either. So
No, no. In fact, they were only the one time. They've only
yeah.
been available one time.
Uh, Samus, you want to say anything before we move on to?
So I'm trying really hard to bite my tongue on this one because it's a soapbox that I get onto a lot as someone who's on the front lines on a daily basis streaming DDO. But I remember back when I first pitched like the raid bypass timer and what eventually turned into in my opinion, turned into the inheritance thing back to Glenn. I took a trip up to Boston and we had dinner and I pitched him a couple of ideas. Those were the two main ones that he was like, wow, really? You think that would make money? And I'm like, yeah, definitely money. And I kind of talked to him about it and kind of how I envisioned it. And we talked about price point. And I gave him some price points out there, and he's like, "That you really think?" I'm like, "Those would sell like hotcakes. You would sell them nonstop." And then we talked about things like a plus 20 heart of wood and stuff like that. And literally last week, someone on stream was upset that they couldn't get a plus 20 heart of wood. They had recently come back to the game. They wanted to revise their old character from, I don't know, whatever it was, into something more in game viable now than what was like 5 years ago when they stopped playing. And they didn't want to do a TR, but they were interested in this idea of the plus 20 heart of wood. Well, they're not for sale. So I don't want to get on my soapbox because at the end of the day, I'm going to be very negative towards SSG when it comes to availability in the store and price points and stuff like that. And I don't want to start off DDOcast being negative because they do so many things right. This is one of the things they do really poorly. So there's a lot of changes in there that I would make personally, and hopefully I think they're working on it. They're stepping forward, making more progress. It's just a matter of the right person making the correct decisions to kind of get things going in there. And I don't know what feedback they've asked like the Players Council or any place like that, but if and I'm currently not on the Players Council because I stream so much, I don't really think I could be quiet about things that need to come up in the future.
I agree. That's
Um,
why I'm not on it.
but if I was a person that was on the Players Council, it would be something that I would bring up on and on and on and on and on and try to get some focus on it because it is something that it is a negative right now for the overall process, and I think that it could be changed very quickly. A lot of the things that Arcot said, I agree with. I think is very good. Um, but for me, a lot of it has to do with like price points and availability. That is really what they need to refocus on. They need to take a really deep look at that and see what they can do to kind of make things more available. Because right now there's this massive influx. I don't know the exact numbers. Like I can't tell you and point to what the numbers is, but I would assume that something like 30% or 40% of the population are both new and returning players,
Hmm.
which is just from, I bet you I get 4 people a week on my stream saying, hey, I'm brand new back to DDO or I'm brand new in general. And I would probably say that somewhere in that 30 to 40% range, which means you're not providing products to the people who are here and now that want those products. Like they don't even know that those are available, let alone that they're special order only or whatever, or special time only for this artificial idea of availability. You don't have materials. Like you already invested the time to produce the product. Just put the product out there. Get it moving. Um
Plus, 20
it,
Hearts of Wood definitely seemed like that one of all the ones we've talked about. That one specifically seems like the one that would be the most obvious and most purchased one to just have in the store.
right.
Um, and I guess like there might be a bean counter somewhere possibly. And I'm not saying this is true or trying to accuse them, but like that maybe there's a bean counter thinking, well, if we don't have that in the store super regularly, then they're gonna buy a heart and go TR and go through the content a lot more. Like, well,
Who
maybe a
cares?
few people, but like, especially what you're talking about, you got a lot of people coming back into the game, and I, I'm trying to think of what build from 5 years ago is still really good and
None.
relevant today.
None. Nothing. That's just it. Like I said,
Yeah.
the game has mutated and changed so much that these old players, these old time vets, are coming back. They have all this ancient raid gear, right, or this old ancient gear. They don't want it, but they don't want to get rid of it because they remember how important it was,
Hmm.
right? They want to take their old build. They want to be playing again. Maybe they're going to work on an alt. They can't move this ancient raid gear off to a leveling alt, right, or someone going through the TR process. It's just a matter of, do we want to take advantage of the new people coming back to DDO and like not just take advantage of them, but give them the products that they want, that not even necessarily that they know about yet is also part of the problem, but they're gonna want. Like I said, literally, I bet you at least three, like I said, at least 3 people a week are like, man, I wish they did this. And I'm like, they do, but
Not right now.
almost
So
never.
infrequently you wouldn't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So
Uh,
again, I don't want to get on my soapbox, but I probably could really hard.
I think you
Samus, you
did a
should
great
probably
job
be the
of doing.
manager of the store. That'd be great.
Well, there was a rabbit hole that I wasn't expecting, but I think it was a really good conversation. And hopefully, someone this SSG takes note at least more frequently with some of that stuff. Now, the one thing of that is like we're never gonna get like I don't think autos boxes are ever gonna be on sale during hardcore season unless you can like take them out of the store on just hardcore.
Well, I don't necessarily think
But
autos boxes that's there's certain things like the boxes in particular are things that are like a special item,
yeah,
right? And that makes sense to me.
yeah, I agree.
And you can have a category of special items, but again, I can't like. There's so many items that we have in this special category right now that cycle in and out of the store. That should not be special items. They should
Sure.
just be there. And somebody needs to look at that and think about it and be like, oh, look, this is definitely not the
Mm-hmm. Okay. I want to get into some of the events this week. So extended server downtime. So this is where we're gonna start. Um, on it was announced Tuesday that on Wednesday Wayfinder and then Thursday would be Sarlona, which was then actually postponed. Um, we're going to be down for an extended time for maintenance. This maintenance includes work to update DDO servers. Other servers will likely see extended downtimes in the near future. Uh, this is similar work to what was done last fall for the Lord of the Rings online, and that is a bunch of extensive behind the scenes server work. Hopefully, the end result is a better experience for everyone. As part of this, world transfers from all game worlds are unavailable for a period of time until this work takes place on all the game worlds. They expect transfers to return in the near future once that server work is complete. I said they did postpone Sarlona. They also have said that they do not plan on having Update 47 Preview 2 until after that server work is done. Which, from a time standpoint, we're probably looking at another 2 weeks to get that server work done. Because they've done one server, and there are 8. So maybe they do one on Monday, probably more like a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, likely not on a Friday. The reason for that is they don't tend to do stuff like that on Friday because if it breaks, then it's broken. Like people have to work on the weekend, and that's not a desirable thing for 2 reasons. One, it means your people lose their weekend, and that's not cool. And 2, then we're not able to play on the weekend, and that's less cool, right? So probably means that you're looking at next 2 weeks, which means we're probably not going to get the update or preview 2 until beginning of August. It's a little bit later than I was expecting, but that's kind of what's going on there. Subsequent to Wayfinder's work happening, and I don't think it's related. It could be, but I don't think it is. There's been a series of kind of issues the last couple of days. So what this looked like is on Wednesday there was they called it service provider issues, and I know CenturyLink actually put out a statement that said, "Hey, we're having problems in the Boston area," which is where SSG is. What that looked for a period of about an hour, the servers basically dumped most players. I think 3 or 4 times. Kyber looked like it was about 3 times, and the Who page went down to maybe 30 players, maybe down to 20. And it did that a couple of times in this space of a couple hours. Thursday, there were more issues, and they actually brought the worlds down for what was like an hour, 2 hours,
About that.
And that they said that they were investigating issues at the data center. They will keep us updated. Both of these days, and both of these kind of things were going on. The forums also were not readily available as well. These issues were also happening on Lotro as well.
All that stuff's located on their virtual login server. So
right.
Yeah, that's it. It's a back end SQL server. I guarantee you is where they were. What was causing the problem, because the login stuff, the to both the worlds and onto the forums are all on a SQL backend. So I guarantee you they have one big SQL clustered server, and I bet you there's either some communications between the servers in the cluster, or they were just having some basic other sort of back issues on in their infrastructure.
Not really having any understanding of what you just said.
That's okay. I've been doing this for 23 years, so
yeah.
I wouldn't expect to know that. So
let me know if this is something that plausibly could happen. If the server's provider like had some issues globally and they made some changes, would those changes then kind of impact the accessibility of SSG stuff?
Sure. There are also all sorts of protocols that you need in order to be able to communicate with the outside world, and amongst other things like DNS, BGP, uh, all sorts of things that CenturyLink could have done to screw up how people could access, the web servers, the login servers, the game servers. So there could have been some initial problems, but I'm thinking right now that the issues that they're still having today, even,
Yep.
I'm not certain that's a CenturyLink issue now. I mean, it made perfect sense that there was an issue on Wednesday, because CenturyLink came out and said there was, but yeah, I don't get the impression from looking around that that's still an issue with CenturyLink.
Yeah, I was just kind of
Which
curious if there could be a cascading effect, right? Like if CenturyLink had an issue, if that could create an issue, an
No,
ongoing issue.
it wouldn't affect it. Well, okay, so it's possible, because the routers that the data center would have to use could have had their tables, their routing tables screwed up, because they update themselves as routes around the internet change. And there are reasons why you would do that in case one part of the internet goes down. The routing tables on and the routers all across the country
Mm-hmm.
would change to be more efficiently to route that traffic. So I mean, but you would have to have problems on a lot of routers, continuing. So
Actually, I
Probably
believe
not.
it's
they're
it's
currently
possible,
having.
but it's not likely.
I believe there's something floating around as well. Some sort of like right now, overall, there's something squirrely. Like it's affecting other games and other systems as well. I don't know if these necessarily what's going on the greater world is necessarily affecting DDO. It could be two other things that are happening at the same time causing other. But like I know YouTube said that they're having some issues also. So like there's something floating around out there causing a little bit of slowdown overall.
So maybe somebody's doing some sort of a denial of service attacks somewhere, and it's affecting more
Possibly.
than just Boston. Then
I
possible.
personally did not have any impact on Wednesday. Thursday, I dropped a couple of times and went and took a break. And Friday, I had the same kind of experience. There was a period of time for I don't know. I think I took a break. I dropped. I came back pretty quickly. I dropped again. Like, okay, I'm gonna go take a break. I got a book that I'm reading. Kind of did that for half an hour, 45 minutes. Came back and was fine. This morning I had a couple of moments where like it seemed like the game was just kind of stopped communicating with the server in much the same way before, but it reestablished a lot faster, and I was back at it. And that happened a couple of times in fairly quick succession. Um, I do want to mention condolences, moment of silence for those who have perished in these recent events on Hardcore. And I've heard numerous accounts of dying in that kind of disconnect thing happening, uh, actually not getting the benefit of their extra life
Yeah.
or lives, uh, which is a huge bummer. Um, I have not seen anything from SSG about rectifying that, and I don't know that they will.
They won't.
I don't think you can. I don't think there's any way to differentiate between
And
those kind of deaths
that's
and
the problem,
legitimate
right?
deaths.
Yeah, that is actually messaging that they said before even Hardcore Season 1, right? Like, dead is dead, and we're not going to do
Yep.
this, specifically because how do you differentiate between this was a legitimate game failure death instance versus someone's trying to game the system and get back in the game because they got themselves killed?
Right.
And I've had that debate a few times. Like, it comes down to the only fair way to adjudicate which deaths are fair and not to rectify them is to not do any.
Yep.
Which is
Yep.
actually kind of almost unfair as well.
Well, it's part of the reason I was so happy that they're doing this extra lives thing, right? Is because it gives you that leeway to
Yeah.
like earn a life in case something weird happens. You're still good to go.
Mhm.
But
In
if
case you grew up with Strim Tom.
well, not just Trim Tom, also Nivbin, like lasering people.
Killing people in Temple of Elemental Evil too.
Yeah, there are definitely streamers out there that will throw you in front of them. Apparently, I'm one this go around.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's kind of what's going on. It seems like it maybe is still happening to a lesser extent. I haven't seen anything to indicate that they're looking at any kind of reparations or anything because it's pretty fairly minor still. But
I think the word, especially on the hardcore, it went out pretty quick that the server is buggy and get out. And I feel like that message went like wildfire through the hardcore server. And if you didn't log out during that time, I don't know what else to tell you. Like my stream, I literally the title of my stream was lag, and I played on live. And
Yeah.
on live even I don't know exactly which night it was, but I had a problem, right? And I was doing SDK and I jumped to where that ladder is with all the fire. I jumped over there to get to the ladder. Had a lag issue. When I started to recover from the lag issue, I got held inside that trap, and then like midair, I came back. I was able to smack my lay on hands, but I was still in midair, so I got my hit points back. When it reconnected, I was lagged again, and in that time, like I got hit by 3 flame jets or things. So I died. I'm like, oh well, whatever. And then I gibbers, because I was doing the quest on live, so I gibbers, and I had connection issues through the entire time that I was gibbered, and died to the gibbers damage. So like, I get it. I understand. If I was on the hardcore at that time, I'd be really upset, as opposed to just being on live and like took it for granted or whatever. But again, those messages go out like wildfire. People follow some Twitters, look at the Twitch titles, like the community will tell you. I am assuming this was on the forums. I mean, I don't go to the forums as much as I should, but I'm assuming that the forums are out there. The information's there. Like, I don't play on hardcore right now, or don't do anything dangerous. Like, okay, I logged in to check my standing. I think I went up 2 positions in the leaderboard. I'm like, hot damn, like, works for me.
Yeah, I would say if you ever experiencing some spots of like consistent lag, like, and not just like lag, like this has been very much like you just suddenly stop communicating, or you see that message that your connection to the chat servers has been lost.
Get
not
out.
a good time to be on a hardcore environment.
Yeah.
It is unforgiving, and that is partially intentional. But having said that, like, I don't want to make light of people that have lost their extra lives in a mechanic that's clearly not the way it's supposed to be. But just be wary of that going forward for at least the next week or so. We'll see. I imagine this will kind of calm down in about a week. So, I think that kind of covers all that stuff. Let's see. Oh, and I was part of a couple conversations that were like, oh, the work on Wayfinder has triggered these massive problems. I don't think that's the case, just from the standpoint of it's impacting Lotro and the forums, and they did this work on Lotro already, and I don't remember there being this kind of a problem then. So I think it's kind of just that are coincidentally happening at the same time. Could be wrong. Like, we've already established, I'm not a
no, that was my
IT
reading
guy,
too,
so.
PJ. That was my reading too, and I suspect they put off the work on the other servers because of their connection issue that they had on later Wednesday. So I mean, there's no point in introducing a new
Variable.
another variable in this. So let's just wait, let their internet issues calm down and connection issues, and then start doing the server upgrades again.
Let's see.
Which is what I would have. That would have been the decision that I would have made if I were on the engineering team. So
less variables is usually better for problem solving.
Yep.
Let's see. Bonus days. Champion Hunter weekend. You can find all of the limited time items with the Champion Hunter in the Hall of Heroes now through July 19th. Cordovan did mention that we often run this bonus for longer. Usually it's a whole week, not just a weekend. It's the one bonus day that is consistently a whole week. He said, but next week is expected to have a lot of individual server downtime for our server work, so we're keeping it to the weekend only for this one. Kind of, again, indicating that we're going to get more of that as well. Kind of going back to earlier discussion, I'm trying to think if there's any items in there that I think should be available more often.
Oh, millions of them. Are you kidding? Those items are great.
Yeah, the freedom of movement potions are particularly good.
And the Death Ward
potion.
Yeah.
Some people really love the blur potion. The cloaks are great. The displacement one. The bracers and the cloak are both very good, depending on situation.
Yeah, dude. Is there? What's the value of this as a bonus days, right? Like, why not just make? Is there anything? I'm trying to think. Is there anything in there that makes sense to not just have always available? Like what?
Again, it's that specialness created by the artificial inavailability,
which we have for festivals, I guess. Which, I mean, that does make them kind of special and fun.
For festivals, that makes sense to me. This kind of stuff, it doesn't.
Sure. Yeah, I think I'm on board with that. I would say maybe the cosmetic-y stuff, like that could be something that more limited time, that might make a little more sense, I guess, but...
I suppose if they, as everything in SSG land, and again, please no one take this as an overall negative, because it is a negative, but it's not something that I would say keep away from DDO. But they start this awesome system, right? They have this mechanic in place. They say we're gonna put out new things. We're gonna rotate stuff through, and then it doesn't happen. So now we just have Champion Hunter, where if they could have had, more sets of different kind of things to rotate through there, I would understand it. But
like
it's another thing where it got started, but it with the intention of continuing, but then it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm. I like what you're thinking. Like if it instead of it just being this like once a quarter kind of a you can go buy this stuff, if they had it kind of more on a rotation of what was available,
right. Well, like what if they had like weapons of some sort, or augment slots of some sort, or special potions of some sort, stuff that eats up those or to get yelled at by Jerry once again, special hirelings for Reaper, like if they rotated through those kind of things, they had extra special value, but it rotated at a reasonable pace, then it would not only create a specialtivity of it being lowly or not there continuously, but you would also have an incentive to save up for certain things. Like, oh man, I really want to get this awesome cosmetic sword, for example, but it's not going to be here very often, so I need to make sure to save. Or like, I'm going to be doing a lot of these. I'm going to do a bunch of TR lives. I want to do Reaper 3s, but I'm not always going to be able to have a person to act as a secondary medic while I'm TRing. Well, I need to buy two of the Reaper level 3 guys, level 4 guys, level 6 guys, level 8 guys. You know what I mean? Like, it just makes more sense to flesh it out more if you're going to rotate things through, but the fleshing out doesn't happen.
Sure. Store stuff. The summer sales continue every week in July. This week, 35% off of Tiefling Scoundrel. So if you don't have that, now is probably the time.
Yeah, I'm still not going to get it. I don't have it, and I'm not going to get it, even if it's on sale. The hell with it.
So good.
You can also get 50% off of Hearts of Blood and Tomes of Fate. Although I would say if you're a VIP and you're looking for Tomes of Fate, just do the
Just do a
gold roll.
gold roll.
Yeah, every day. You'll get them eventually.
Yeah, I got several +2 to +3s. I don't even know what to do with +1, +2.
I have 7 of those on a server I don't play on from rolling in the last year and a half on one server.
Yeah,
Uh,
not surprised. Not surprised.
you can also get 75% off of veteran status, which is pretty good. Pretty good deal there. Well,
Mhm.
it's depending. Is that 1 and 2? I guess it probably is both.
I don't know.
One veteran status 1 you can unlock on a server for 1,000 favor. Veteran status 2 is 3,000 favor. Ooh.
I don't know. I never get to 3,000 favor before I TR
I
or
think you
something.
just get it as a VIP too. So.
Well, there you go. Then that's why I wouldn't know.
This normal sales on your guild 25% off of astral shards, and guild renown elixirs, 50% off of guild charters and guild airship beacons. If you're over on hardcore and you want to get some astral shards, this is probably the best time to get them. They don't usually go on sale more than that. A word of caution on the hardcore server about guild renown elixirs: there is a cap of how many levels you can get in a day on your guild levels. So if you're really low, maybe don't use those. If you're up in like the 50s, 60s range, it'd probably be helpful. But
I will tell you guys though, as a bonus that I didn't know about until this last go around, various sagas, guild renowned saga stuff does go past that cap.
oh, okay, sure. If you take it, it'll still take the guild renown past the artificial.
Correct.
Yeah.
Even if you're capped for generating guild renown, you can take those sagas in rewards and level up past that during the day. Which is when you really want to drink those potions. You don't want to just drink them and run through quests and whatnot. It's fine to do that, but you really want to drink one when you have like a bunch of sagas primed.
That is how most guilds who kind of really pushed into that to 200, like that's usually how they end up doing it. Is you get a couple people, they go set up some sagas, you get a guild renown weekend, drink a pot, boom, 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 hit a bunch of sagas.
Right.
The coupon is a long-lasting potion of Bull's Might times 5. The coupon code is Bull Might 5. Those are +2 to strength. They're the store version, and I think you can also get them from Remnants as well. So, pretty good. Community news. Let's see. The 390th Chronicle. Starts with the DDO Tracker, is a regularly updated PC app that lets you manage characters, quests, challenge, saga solvers, and more. Check out more there. Is that actually that's not just a PC thing though, right? Like you can do that on a Mac, I think, right? I don't know. It's an interesting looking program. It's got the solvers they mentioned. You can check it out on the forums and kind of get it. She's got some screenshots there, but very nice advanced trackers if you want to keep track of things for your characters and stuff as well. A YouTuber going by the name Free to Play DDO has been releasing a ton of individual quest walkthroughs in recent days, including commentaries and tips. So you can check out those videos. It might be really helpful if you're on hardcore and trying to remember this quest that you haven't run in years, if you haven't done the first couple hardcore seasons. Guildhall. Sacred Supremacy is a new guild started and run by 3 veteran players on Galana with their own Discord, airship, and more. The laid-back group of friends are looking for like-minded adventurers to establish a great guild that can lead endgame activities, including raids and daily Reaper runs. You can check them out. The comment: what would your party bring to the beach? Potions of water breathing?
The tunes. Get it? Tunes? DDO tunes, TUNES, get it? Tunes? Okay, never mind. It was funny. Trust me.
Not yet, but it'll eventually, when you replace with all new words, it'll be hilarious.
You got a clever answer there, Samus?
I don't. Yeah. I take it back. The tunes.
Thank you.
It's all about the delivery.
Fansite news: the damsels of DDO run into a small problem. DDOCast finds friendly ballistas. That's a little misleading. Because I shot my party members with the ballista in Three Broad Cove. The DDO stream is your first stop to find DDO on Twitch. This week's highlights are DDO PL holds the bottle, D&D Night mixes DDO and tabletop, and Doug Glendower gets down to questing. Also on Twitch, Apocalypse. This is supposed to be Apocalypse Dom, not Apocalypse Dawn. Claims a world first on killing time. Oh, that's definitely Dom because that's Lava Divers. Strim Tom runs hardcore, and Voodoo Spice does coffee and chat. On YouTube, Thazara practices stealthy repossession, and Samius Gurobo heads to hardcore, and the LJK 1232 completes Reaper 6 Grim and Barrett. Man, Jerry, I spent a little more time editing there. There's a couple of typos in that section.
That's true. I'm gonna jump in here real quick for some shameless self-promotion.
All right.
If you guys can, I'd really appreciate it if you'd go visit my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Samius Gurobo, and give that a subscription. I would really like to get to 1,000 followers on YouTube. That's like your first big hurdle to get monetized on YouTube. I had sent in my application to be monetized, and it sat there for like 6 months, and then they changed the rules, so I missed the previous cutoff. I got a lot of good stuff out there. I have my playthrough guide. It's currently got, I think, every quest in it from level 1 to 18, definitely 17, maybe 18. There might be some missing, with the exception like Temple of Elemental Evil and Tower of Frost. So if you want to like, literally, you can just level along with me right there. It shows you everything. I try to give you all the tips and tricks and everything. I even go through and do stuff that sometimes you wouldn't want to see, or sometimes you want to see, like I think, is it search and rescue maybe? There's like the quest itself is like 20 minutes to solo, but then there's an optional that took me an hour and 45 minutes.
Sounds about right.
And I was just like, what is this optional? Like,
It's a
because
long one.
I was like, why? I don't understand. Like, I didn't know. But that's all in there.
Yeah.
So like,
No.
I share everything with you guys to the best of my ability over there on the YouTube channel. Of course, we also have vlogs for all the Twitches, character builds, breakdowns on how I got to wherever I ended up on the hardcore server. I'm going to be starting a new series here in the next week or two. The DDO Player's Handbook, which I'll just kind of like go through. It'll be designed for new players. We'll talk about gear and classes and builds and quests and what to expect and all that stuff. The idea will be to give you guys, 13 years of Dungeons and Dragons in a 30-minute video on a particular subject. So please do me a solid if you wouldn't mind. If you enjoyed the cocktail hour or me not wearing pants over the years, do me a solid. Please jump over there and subscribe. It costs you literally nothing. You don't even have to watch videos or interact. Just go over there and hit the button. All right, carry on. Now that I ran my own ad.
That's okay. Let's see. Talking Shop, Hardcore Season 3 Saving Grace continues. A reminder, you have through August 31st to redeem your free coupon for adventure packs. If you have not done that, and you are listening, and you're at your computer, do that now.
Stop listening.
Stop listening to us. Do that now. Then go subscribe to Samius, and then finish listening to this show.
So close to the right order.
Let's see. Cordovan is also running on hardcore and answering questions on this week's weekly Wednesday lunchtime live stream. I feel like next season we need to, before season 4 of hardcore starts, we need to start a pool. Just like, how many times is Cordovan going to die on the weekly Wednesday lunchtime live stream on hardcore? It feels like it could be some entertainment value there.
I watch him do these, and I just like, and I know that people join his groups or whatever. I'm just like, man, I could start my stream on time and I could get him through this stuff. But I'm like, no.
ruin some of the entertainment value, I think.
I think
So.
it would. I think if there was an efficient like hardcore Jerry for like the first 6 levels, people just wouldn't tune in.
I mean, people. We know this from DDOCast Splat, right? Arkat, like people tune in to see us get ourselves killed.
Die. Sure, absolutely.
Kind of, especially on hardcore, right? Because it's like,
It's the
oh,
best
you get to
part.
watch the watch those.
You get to watch the tears stream down the eyes, and
Yeah, people love watching the streamers die. That is why they tune in.
Yeah, I mean, it's the reactions, right? Like you get to watch that. You get to watch someone else have that reaction. It's not you. All right. Enough stuff there. Yeah. Don't forget to watch DDO. Check out DDOCast Splat. That's the static group that Arcot and I are in. Most Wednesdays, 5:30 p.m. Pacific time. We took this week off because the server, like an hour before we were gonna do that, the servers started having those issues, and like, not worth it. Of course, then it kind of turned out that the servers kind of got back in shape, and we could have done it, but I ended up doing something else and had some fun in Defiler the Just for a couple hours. So, let's see, that'll take us.
which, by the way, congratulations on being part of that. That was a cool achievement.
We completed it on Reaper 10. That's why he's congratulating us.
Oh, congratulations!
Yeah, it was fun. Let's see. Lightning post. Fuzzy Duck wrote in about our last episode. Said the spelling and grammar errors are irritating, but generally not too egregious. Still, it's a job I'd be happy to take. Yeah, I think there's a few people that would probably jump at a chance to work at SSG probably. Let's see. It certainly he'd also almost certainly end up adjusting everything to British English standards. And then just sit back with a nice cup of tea and a biscuit while basking in the forum outrage.
Reveling in the forum outrage.
Yeah. Also demand that Elminster get a couple of his lines redone. It's pronounced thee, not ye.
Oh, come on.
Hey,
get over yourself. He's fine.
Maybe not in Lameville, that is Eberron. Maybe it's pronounced differently there.
To the degree the death messages at low level as the world broadcasts were great, as well as giving those occasional moments of schadenfreude when you see a high level death or a cluster all at once. It's also a constant reminder not to play like you might on the regular servers, or you could be the next one to appear in one of those notifications. Yep.
I feel like that is a specific nod to no longer being VIP only. I feel like that is definitely a situation. But also people like DDOcast alum, Trent, Siggy. Sig, I don't know if you caught his stream last night, but he like literally was trying to murder himself in the most fun and interesting ways possible. And he would have been spamming the death messages hard last night. If he would have been able to show below level, I think level 3, right? 2 or 3 something.
I think it's two and higher.
Something like that.
They made a change where it was briefly where it was 5 and up, and I think they reverted that back to 2. And I can say that with an absolute degree of certainty because one of my kind of favorite pastimes of when I'm kind of tooling around on the hardcore servers is counting the number of people who die to a Reaper before they're level 5. Like when a level 2 is dying to a Reaper, know someone made a bold choice.
Yeah, maybe you shouldn't be doing Reaper at
level
such
2?
a low level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Disagree. Get out there, get it done. Not even kidding. Go through, get your ghost touch weapon out of Keep on the Borderlands, and show that moxie. Just turn around, right, and Keep on the Borderlands, and go to town. Get those points. I believe in you.
Fuzzy continues saying, if they want us to run through the subterranean to get to Legendary Vision of Destruction, then we could really do with an epic subterranean to run through to get to it. Ideally with an epic Garamel who has some extra tasty named loot. Maybe even some of the older heroic raid items like the selection they did for that anniversary giveaway a few years back. Interesting idea. I don't think it's ever going to happen.
Never going to happen. Never going to happen.
No.
I mean, I like the idea of some fun things in that chest because that's always been kind of a weird esoteric drop chest.
Oh, it's a great chest, but
you're not going to get raid items.
No.
Grinding down horses would be nice, but instead of a cosmetic, make it a consumable. Maybe lasagna as essentially a high-level version of the tasty ham. That's a little concerning. Having specific.
What, you gonna ride a piece of lasagna around the realms or
I think
something?
he's meaning just like grind the horses down into an edible that gives you health, like not get.
Oh, I see.
Everything is edible depending on the situation, my friend.
On that note, having the specific NPCs recurring is nice and adds some fun continuity as you work through the quests. But I'm still holding out my hope for Arbeth, the crazy kobold for Ataraxia's Haven, having a reappearance as a dragon and saying, "I told you so." Like where he's going. One thing that stood out from in the new legendary loot was the set with minus 100% range threat. Yeah, that's probably one of the few really good sets there. For the new legendary raids, I think the shield's effects need to be a bit more unique than just does damage of whatever type, as while the occasional big hitter effects are impressive, the more consistent, reliable damage delivered by legendary best defense, which isn't even a raid item, is generally going to be more desirable. Someone who actually uses shield offensively, yeah. Instead, I'd like to see more unique and interesting on hit effects, so a character who doesn't normally use a shield orb as an offensive weapon would actually want to make a shield bash from time to time. Yeah, some ideas there. I'd like to see more flexibility with set bonuses. I think a good way to do that is not require full sets to get the bonuses. Example, have 3 pieces for the set, but 5 different items that qualify. All different gear slots, not just 2 plus 3 different weights of armor.
The adherence of the mist set was like that, and that made a lot of sense to me.
It's also a 5-piece set, so it made it a little more
Sure.
flexibility. But yeah, in general, I'm on board. There are, I think, I feel like there were. I guess they were just kind of alternative in the same slot, right? They weren't different slots. So.
I think people need to get off of the Kool-Aid that is the set bonus. I feel like there's too much. It's too.
They're too
It's
good.
too, and we'll get into it soon, right? We're almost to the gear part. The promise of the show, we're actually almost there, but it's too much. Find your gear, find the right set, and build everything else around it.
I mean, it's because the sets are too good. That's
what I'm saying. There's too many. There's too good. We need to roll back a little bit. Make some sweet stuff that breaks sets that actually can compete.
Well, just add a piece of armor, nice piece of armor, and that'll break a boatload of sets.
That's what I'm saying. Like, get some stuff in there that compete that's not a set.
Mm-hmm.
A set.
All right. Well, on that note, I think we're ready to actually get into our gearing up discussion.
Woohoo!
So this should be a lot of fun. I'm really excited about this. I think this will be some great stuff. I want to start with kind of theory behind gearing. Like, why is gearing Tetris kind of a thing? Why do we, and why, especially we're going to try to find this conversation mostly towards kind of new and recurring players. That's partly why the spirit of the question was like, hey, how do I gear up? But there's also kind of this idea that everyone has to keep continually kind of retool their gearing, potentially every update, which kind of get into. And I think for me, when I talk about like why is gearing kind of a thing, is if you think about the different places and aspects of a character that generates and is the power level of that character, gearing is, I think, the easiest and fastest level to catch up to veteran players. But it also changes the fastest, right? So, and what I mean by that is, every update, the gear Tetris meta can change. And it typically does to a certain degree. Maybe not for everybody, but it changes frequently and you have to go and get new gear. And I'm not talking about like the Mythic Reaper plus bonuses. Like, just, I don't want to get into those weeds, but from the standpoint of which gear is, quote, best in slot for a particular build, that changes frequently. But because it changes frequently, it's also the easiest thing to go and do, right? Like, you can go farm out a couple items and you're in that short amount of time, you're caught up to everyone else on that power metric, as opposed to the number of past lives it would take to catch up.
So I can't tell if Arkat's talking and he's just muted, or I'm just going to go first. But I'm going to go first. I alluded to this at the beginning that if you think of the different pillars or legs, that is DDO, gear is a primary one, right? And I agree with the idea that it's easy to catch up, it's easy to reset. So when you like, especially for returning players that are level 20, when you're coming back in, a little bit of research or a little bit of asking around, like, oh yeah, you're gonna want this set, and then you know where to go and get there. And that's probably 60% of your character. You put the other, the other 15% or 20% is TRs, and then the last 20%, the important 20%, is your personal skill. So like, it is the majority of your overall character's power is having the right gear, especially right now with the power creep that we've had over the last 3 years selling expansions, and I can only imagine going forward that's going to continue to be the case.
I think that's pretty much a given, especially considering we're raising the level cap.
Right. So like, I think all of those sentiments are exactly correct. It's just a matter of keep in mind that, again, the most important part of your character is not the gear, even though it's a big percentage of the power. And it's not your past lives, which again is a large part of your power. It's you. So it doesn't matter if you have all the best gear. If you make poor decisions when you're playing, you're not going to have as much success. So take some time and reflect on what you're doing, more than just how do I get my gear Tetris the best or whatever, or this is what the forum says is the best build. You got to figure out how to play and operate that character as well. So once you figure that stuff out, then the gear Tetris and the past lives really shine. I'm not saying that the other stuff isn't important, but the first half is, or that skill level is where you want to focus on why you're getting this gear, why you're farming out the stuff. Because when all those things come together in harmony, you're going to have a lot of success and a lot of fun.
That sounds very much like a hardcore perspective, too.
No, that's how it is.
Doesn't matter how much gear you have. If you do stupid things, you're still going to die.
I did warn you guys that that's where my head is at right now.
Arkat, you want to jump in with kind of the theory part of this?
Well, I think gear is definitely important. I'm not sure that it's 60% of what's going to be your character or or your results, positive or negative. Build, I think build matters quite a bit. But I will agree with Samus that probably the most important thing is indeed the decisions you make as a player. So player skill. If you're not much of a button masher, then don't play builds where there's a lot of buttons to push, clickies, all that sort of stuff. So yes, player skill is definitely probably the most important. Our player skill, player decision making is most important. Then I think then build and then gear are probably roughly about the same. Maybe player skill is 40%, and then maybe build is 30%, and gear is the other 30%. But definitely player skill, player decision making is the most important thing.
Having said that, let's talk about how to go about getting the gear to really kind of bring your power level up. So what are some? So I want to talk for how do you figure out what gear to get? So just so you kind of get an idea of where we're going roadmap, we're going to talk about kind of more generals, and we will get into kind of more specifics later. Certainly not on this portion, but it'll be part of this discussion. So I want to start with what are some resources that we can point to for people to figure out, okay, what gear should I go and get?
Okay, so I'm going to jump in first on this one. So probably the most important resource out there to go figure out what gear is available at what level, so forth and so on, and to understand what the modifiers and the enhancements and all that sort of stuff on the gear, how that stuff works. The most important resource out there is the DDO wiki. And the DDO Wikipedia or DDOWiki.com, I think is what it is. That is the most important resource out there. Now, it may not be 100% accurate because it is a community community worked on or generated resource. So that means if things change about an item, it may not necessarily get updated because the community that tends to update it are more concerned with the latest things,
The
the
newer
newest
stuff.
things,
Sure.
and getting that right. But if you have let's say the Sun Sword, or rather the Sunblade, let's say that gets a slight change in the and let's say the next update, we may not know about it for quite some time, so that would be one reason why it didn't get updated in the wiki. And another thing is just apathy. Who cares? I mean, nobody really goes out of their way to farm the flame tongue or the sunblade. So again, it really is a lot of interest out there, by the community as to how accurate and what they want to update, as opposed to what needs to be updated. So the DDO wiki is by far the most important resource to figure out what's going on with your gear.
I think with the DDO wiki, I want to kind of highlight a couple of different ways you can use it too, right? So they have a listing. When you're on their homepage, it kind of shows you the last couple updates, and there's always a link there that says to the new items. And when you're on that page, you get a list of the items by update, and at the top you can go back and look at the different updates and items. And they also in that highlight, where the expansions are, or kind of notable ones, which can be helpful just because nobody remembers what update Ravenloft or Sharn were.
37.
Okay, Arkat remembers. They are. But it can be helpful to kind of find some of those high points. And we'll talk about why that's important in terms of looking for gear. The other way you can use it too is you can search by item slot for named items, right? So say that you're trying to figure out, okay, I've got most of my gear set up, but I don't know what to put in my head slot. You can go look at helmets, right, and or by slot in that way. Also, I don't want to go too far down a crafting rabbit hole, because even though crafting is a major part of gearing and kind of filling in those holes, that might be a little too much to kind of really bring into, especially when we're talking about new returning players. But understand that crafting can be a really powerful tool in your gearing, and kind of pulling in some of that knowledge. You can also use DDO Wiki to kind of figure out what can I craft in what slot. So whether you're looking for I'm trying to fit this enhancement into my gear slot, where can I put it? Or I have this open slot, what can I put on it? You can use it in both of those directions. And all the other 30 crafting systems we have in the game as well. Samus, what are some resources you want to point people to?
Well, I was gonna say, if Arkat took care of the most important, which I agree, the wiki is definitely the most important. Then I would say Twitch and YouTube is actually probably the second most important. We don't have the biggest streaming presence for a lot of games, but we do have a very, very significant one. Myself, Voodoo, Nim, Dom, Strimtom, you, Jerry, Shu, Axel, Doug, like I can't even think of all of them. Like, there are people who are streaming so regularly or putting out YouTube videos so regularly. Tobrel, the list goes on. Like, you can find somebody there, but the community has something that's different than like a lot of other communities, and a willingness to help. So even if you don't necessarily get the answer from me, right? You can join my Discord, or you can put the message in the chat, and there's going to be a dozen people there that love to help answer your question. because the community is such, they are so willing to help others. Compared to like some other communities I have checked out in the past, you don't get that kind of willingness, or you don't necessarily get that kind of input. Like, oh, you don't know X or Y Z, you're a noob, get out of here, or whatever. That's not the case in DDO. DDO is a lot more welcoming when it comes to that kind of stuff. So if you have a question, or you just want to bounce ideas off of somebody, do it. Again, literally last week in the chat, somebody was asking me, hey, what if I put this build together? And I was like, man, I don't know. That sounds really kind of not very good to me. And then him and another person started bouncing the ideas back and forth in the chat, ended up putting it together with the iconic character and just like pour it up. Like, he's like, I'm loving this build. It's doing amazing things. And to me, the community makes just a huge difference when it comes to like getting your knowledge base up and going.
Yeah, and there's kind of a fun thing in here too. You could, depending on kind of the level of you're looking for, you can end up with a couple of different answers to the question too, right? Which can get really interesting. You know, there are some kind of clear winners in what might be, quote, like the best in slot gear kind of a thing. So it's not always, you're not always going to get a ton of differing answers, but you might get a couple different answers of, you know, what people use, and it's not always, especially if you're getting that information from different sources, right? Like if you ask my people in my guild, Lava Divers and Kyber, about, hey, what gear should I have for this build? You're probably gonna get a lot of the same answers because, you know, in that community we share that information a lot, right? Someone figures something out and that information gets shared in that community. But another community, you know, you go to Galanda and ask another guild, I'll give a shout out to Best Beaches around, you know, if you ask that guild what gear should I use, you might get a different answer because there's a different community going on there, different information being shared.
Well, and the flavors of the week change. Those
Yep.
things can change within servers or personalities. Again, using like the Twitch chat, for example. If somebody asked you how I should gear up a paladin, you know, I suspect a sword and board may be involved.
Probably.
It depends on a lot of different people. Where someone asked me, I'd be like, if you have a shield in your hand, you're doing it wrong. Because right now, a two-handed fighting is just so strong.
Yeah.
So like, it depends on what you're trying to do and the perspective. So all that stuff could shift around and change, which is where having that live community really comes into play, and you can really really kind of put things to work. And I always point to like the contrast of a year ago with me and StrimTom. If you were to ask what you feel about wizards, for example, I realize we're talking about gear. Like StrimTom a year ago would have told you wizards suck, and I would have been like, wizards the best class ever. And then they did the Eldritch Knight pass, and now StrimTom's like been converted to like wizards, and I'm like, I'm glad that you're here, but now we got to get you off of this Eldritch Knight thing and over here to this Pale Master thing where the DDO gods intended you to be. And it's like, he's like, no, I'm not going. So like you see what I mean? Like you can get these different flavors and these different personalities and take different perspectives on all these different things. And it gives you information, and it condenses all that experience down into 2 or 3 different nuggets. So again, like I said, it might be like, oh, you should just try to find your greatsword, you know, and play and have a good time and see how you feel. And then you can worry about what's best or whatever. Yeah, like that to me is the driving force. And to a lesser extent, the wiki is also an extension of that community, right? Where they're working together to get you the information. It's just not as live. It's a little bit lag time sometimes, as Arkat mentioned.
I think the thing with the wiki is it's a really great information resource. I think what you're kind of getting at with, and I would kind of extend, you know, YouTube, Twitch, the forums, and just people you run into when you're playing, right? You get to have more of a conversation. Like there's a conversation aspect in that, which can be a little bit more, get a little more to that nuance, right? Like, well, what are you trying to do, right? Like,
exactly.
We're not talking about classes, but Bard, for example. If I were to just say, okay, what's the best gear for a Bard? Samus's first response to that probably would be, "What kind of bard?"
No, I'm
Because,
gonna say a dagger. Just go find a dagger and have a good time.
but
You,
there's
you shouldn't be swinging a
Hand axe.
weapon.
Come on, it's obviously hand axe. Come on.
bards are kind of the exemplary. They're not the. It's not unique to bards, but bards are kind of the exemplary. Like, you can build these in a lot of different ways, right?
Right.
But you can have that kind of more conversation about, like, well, what are you trying to do with your character? We already kind of
Exactly.
mentioned paladin. Are you trying
If
to
you
be
want to give
sword and
them,
board, or two-handed fighting and really big numbers, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, if you're trying to give something a cold, it really doesn't matter what you're swinging at them when you're playing your bards. But I I understand the sentiment.
and like, when you see other people playing something that looks similar to what you're trying to do, don't be afraid to ask them. Like, I am a firm believer that probably 95% of the DDO population, if you say, "Hey, can I ask you questions about your build?" they would be more than happy to tell you how their build, whatever it is, and however true it may be, is the best incarnation of that build.
There's
Yeah.
one thing that's universal amongst D&D nerds is that if you can get them talking about their character, they won't stop.
Yep.
That is so true.
So you use that as a resource, and I'll tell you, like, I think there's a big misconception here in that new and returning players feel like they can't ask these questions. Look, you can, and understand that you're not the only ones asking those questions, because you know the best of the best 1% of the 1% of the 1% that play this game, they ask those questions of each other too, and they share that information. Like, this is not secret information. It's just people come up with uh, these ideas and figure out these things in part by sharing that information and bouncing ideas off each other, and that happens at the high level. And they're generally more than happy to kind of share that thinking with anyone who asks them as well. At least that's always been
I
my
would agree.
experience.
In general, that is a very true statement. There are a lot of people out there, however, that are like the secret builds or the secret stuff, and typically those aren't the people you're trying to. At the end of the day, you honestly want to try to follow and emulate.
And if you're a new and returning player, you're probably not going to end up running with them anyways, because they're not going to be in the party that you're going to run in. So,
Correct.
Yeah. So there's some resources. We're going to kind of move into how to approach figuring out what gear to get. And we talked about this a little bit before. I kind of we're going to diverge this conversation to two kind of main tracks. One of those tracks being endgame. What does gearing up look like at? You're trying to flesh out a character to play at endgame, level 30 raids, upcoming Feywild, that kind of stuff. Again, we're gonna keep this general so you can kind of get an idea of how to figure out for newer content before we get into specific existing stuff now, because it's gonna change, and we know that. That's part of why we're talking about gearing. Generally, it changes regularly. The other track is kind of more of you're reincarnating. You're gonna do a bunch of reincarnation past lives, and you're looking at it in terms of how am I gonna gear for that journey, as it were. So that's kind of where we're going to kind of go in terms of an overall conversation. We'll kind of talk about each of them in general. But what are kind of the big differences for you guys when you're thinking about those two different tacks?
Well,
Okay, go ahead.
yeah, I'll start good. So obviously there's the beginner stuff, what you want as level 1, level 2 characters, and it just seems to me that Keep on the Borderlands is where pretty much everybody is going, at least now, to get the best of the very very low level stuff. And then so you want to think about where's my lowest level stuff, and then at what levels should I start looking at changing my gear set out it again. This is one of the good things about crafting. If you get into crafting, the Kenneth crafting, you can craft entire sets of gear, let's say every 4 levels. So here's my level 1 to 4 stuff. Here's my 4 to 8 stuff. Here's my 9 to 12 stuff. But you have to seriously be in crafting in order to do that. Me personally, I just get all my level 1 and 2 stuff. Then I go look for my level 10 stuff. And then I look for my like level 14, 15, 16 stuff. And honestly, how fast epics go, I can probably just live on my level, 15, 16, 14 stuff until like 28, 29 when I'm looking for my end game stuff. I mean, there are people that will have like a mid 20s set of gear, but generally I don't find that's really super necessary. So yeah, so look at these tiers that where you really want to start changing out your gear, and then start saving gear at those tiers so that you can use no matter what kind of a tune you're putting together.
So I I look at this a little bit differently, similarly in some ways and differently than others. So as a quote unquote permanent TR train guy right now, right? I'm grinding through my lives on my stream. I I feel like part of the fun that I get from leveling up and getting a level is going and seeing what new toys I have access to. So like I will look at the level 1 stuff and the level 2 stuff. I usually generally skip level 1 and 2 in general. That's a different philosophy. Um but when I'm reincarnating, like there's certain watermark gear that kind of is really important. Um like and I don't want to get into specific here, but like at level 3 you have the blur bracer. At level 6 you have your hats. Um at level 9 maybe you have this. Like they're minor levels. So I like to sprinkle along and look and see because for me when I'm playing DDO, my Skinner button, something less than I used to talk about a whole lot, is this concept of the Skinner button that you push to have fun, right? So for me, a lot of me hitting that Skinner button is taking my level and seeing what new options I have available. So I like to stop and look. Now, in that same idea, there's definitely watermark levels where you don't have to, but you want to stop and look at gear up. You want to look at level 10 because that's where the Ravenloft stuff is at, right? We talked about how the expansions have different tier power levels. Well, when you're leveling up on the reincarnation path, your first major power level watermark is level 10 for Ravenloft. Then the next one is 15 for Sharn gear.
Shard. Yeah.
And then depending on what build you have, maybe level 17, you have like a sub hit for Sharn, the Sharn docks. I can't remember what they expand. Soul Survivor?
Yeah.
So there's watermarks in there. There's watermarks in epics as well. Like most people don't really worry that much about it. Most people just continue on with their level, their Sharn gear because the Sharn gear is very strong. It can carry you fairly deeply. But there's epic keep on the borderland stuff, and a lot of that level 21 stuff is quite good and is very key to pulling you along. You may or may not have a web weapon, to be specific, like again something that's old and you may not use it for very often, but certain builds might come into play and take that into account.
You're talking about caught in the web, by the way. For
Caught in the web.
Yeah, like
people who didn't
Celestia
get
and
that
so forth.
reference.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
And then there's another tier a little bit later on, right before you get to 30. I think it's 29, where then your epic Sharn and your epic Ravenloft stuff kind of kicks, and that's like your final tier, and then you have your in-game grind in place there. So like there's different watermarks along the way depending on what your goal is, and like I said, it all depends on how you enjoy the game. Like, and I'm gonna turn this back to from the hardcore perspective, right? Because that's what I've done most recently. There's one piece of gear for the build that I used that I needed out of Sharn or out of Ravenloft. So I went and I got that. Everything else, whatever. I'll just figure it out along the way from random loot gen and stuff like that. But there's one piece of gear I wanted from Ravenloft at 10. But my whole build really wants this one named item set at level 17 from the Sharn dogs. And that is such a huge power upgrade when I got there that I suddenly, once it was completed, I felt very comfortable grinding everything out on from 17, 18, 19 before I'm ready to take level 20, because there is such a big increase in power right there. So depending on your mindset and where you're looking and where the lifespan of the character is, because if the lifespan of your character is, I'm going to TR at 20, which means I'm probably not going to actually take level 18 and 19, depending on my plan. I would suggest taking them because I find them to be a lot of fun. But maybe my end game gear is now level 17. So do I want to make that a watermark, or can I live on my watermark at 15? So to me, it's a matter of defining your focus. If you're going to go to the very end, right, and you're going to grind the end game and do that and play in that version of the continual grind, you need to decide what watermarks are important. And like, how can I limp along to get where I want to be there at the end? And that's a personal choice that everyone's going to have to.
And it may change over time too, right?
Oh, 100%.
When you're talking about TRing, there's a lot of different ways of going about it. I think the more common one, particularly when we're talking about racial TRs, is figure out one or two builds that might, it's gonna be like a flavor of the week or month or year kind of build, right? Like whatever build you're doing, you're gonna do a bunch of lives on it, and as opposed to if you're doing maybe heroic class lives, you're gonna be using different builds, and so that gearing concept is going to kind of change and be a little more fluid.
And I think it's that too is going to change depending on what it is you like to do.
Right.
So like, I let people vote on my build typically, right? So I end up changing stuff all the time between life to life, class to class. Like things are completely random to me. But I recommend for people who are new to DDO and they're looking to like become successful, do some stuff, get some lives under their belt, and then move into epics. They go, Sam, what do you recommend? I'm like, well, do you like range? Do you like melee? Because that's going to change things. If you like range and you're worried about being close to monsters, then I'd recommend like you do some ranger lives and you get your extra damage from that, and then you find your gear that goes accordingly with that. Like maybe you find what is it called? The silver longbow. Like if you're going to be a ranger, or maybe you want to be inquisitive, and then there's other crossbows, So, and then you can recycle a lot of that core concept, regardless of your build. You could play a ranged fighter or a ranged cleric, or a melee ranger or a melee. You can carry that kind of concept through and keep that core gear in place, without if it's a style that you appreciate and enjoy. And that doesn't mean that you can't be like, all right, well, I've done 7 melee lives. Now I'd like to do a range life to mix it up. It doesn't mean you can't change. It just means that the gearing becomes, all right, maybe I'm not going to be as effective on my range life because I have all this melee gear in place.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that I kind of want to push in that we're talking about kind of more of a high level reincarnation versus endgame. How are these approaches to gearing differently? Endgame is going to be something where you're really talking about kind of twinking and really kind of at that point you're mostly going to be looking for like that +1 or 2 and really maximizing and kind of getting those the optimal set. And that's going to involve a lot of, okay, what's going to be my main slot in these different places, and maybe some swappable things that I might need depending on what you're doing. But you're really going to be looking at kind of doing more of this concentrated gear farming experience. And it's going to change frequently, right? Like every update has the potential to throw in this new piece and upset the house of cards. And you're gonna get one new item. Like they're gonna come up with this one item. It's like, oh my gosh, this item screams this character, this build that I have, and I absolutely need to put it into my gear. Okay, what's in that gear slot? Oh nuts, it's my constitution item, and now I need to find a new constitution item, and I'm going to put that in this slot, and the whole thing just kind of comes tumbling down. And
it's a cascade.
Yeah, it's what we call the gear Tetris, right? Like, there's this one item you have to have, and it changes everything, and you have to now go figure out what that's going to look like. That's kind of the end game gearing experience. The reincarnation experience is, I think, a lot slower in change. Partly because there's more range, right? So if you're talking about reincarnation, you're probably gonna have, like, kind of what Arkat and Samus were alluding to, is like you're gonna have gear sets at these different levels, right? Like you kind of just naturally end up doing that. Ravenloft being a really good example, right? Um, and just take Ravenloft as an example. When Ravenloft came out, it was obviously the newest stuff. It was the best stuff that you could get at level 10, and it was the best stuff you could get at level 29. Well, that's no longer true at level 29, right? Like, I think most players would agree that Sharn gear is generally more powerful, and the stuff you're going to be looking towards over Ravenloft. There might be a couple Ravenloft pieces that you still want, or whatever, but Sharn in general is going to it overpowers Ravenloft. Well, but in Heroics, level 10, we're still going to talk a lot about Ravenloft gear because it's still this massive thing. So, like, that gear, the best in slot kind of conversation changes, I think, more slowly in the Heroics than it does at that end game epic spot. I would also say that if you're talking about, like, you're going to be doing a bunch of reincarnations and you're trying to gear for that, your gear farming strategy is probably going to be a lot different, right? Like, my strategy when reincarnating is, okay, well, I'm going to run, there's this piece of gear that I want for this build out of this quest. Well, every life, I'm going to go run that quest and try and get it. But I'm not going to, like, necessarily farm it until I ransack that quest on all 20 of my characters, or until I get it, right? Like, I'm just going to run it every time I kind of go through it, and that's kind of more my farming strategy, as opposed to an endgame where that gear farming strategy is going to be much more concentrated in, I'm going to go ransack this chest until I get this item.
I feel like most of that's true, right? Like I would agree with you about 80%. But there are things that occasionally come into play that mix things up heavily.
Yeah.
And it can come out of left field. So, like, for example, the Mimic event, right? For a lot of new players or returning players, you haven't encountered the Mimic event.
Sure.
And a Mimic event is something you might have built your sets around, or you might have, done 2 or 3 TR lives and you're good to go. But I'm going to tell you, and this is a little bit of a spoiler, please hit the wiki. The Mimic event in particular, the belt and the cloak are, especially at level 4, are 2 of the most powerful items you can possibly have before level 10. And in a lot of cases, I don't even take them off at level 10 unless there's a Ravenloft set, particularly that's competing with them. All right? Because they're so powerful. And that's an event that comes out of nowhere, right? And they compete. Same thing with, like, the Cove stuff sometimes can do that to you, or the Christmas event, or the anniversary event, or Maybar. Like, we're going to probably talk about these specifics later, but especially for new players and returning players, you spend all this time looking at the wiki, you're looking at quests, you're looking at gear sets, you're seeing what people are going on. Then one of these events hit, and you don't realize how good these things are because they're not in everyday conversation. Because they're not there every single day. But now, for that limited time, they're there, and you need to take advantage of the situation. And that situation could be, maybe it doesn't affect you this life, but maybe it'll affect you next life. So there are things that can come out of nowhere and shake it up.
That's a great example of something that, even from a reincarnation perspective, that you're going to go and farm, right? Like, because it's there for a limited time.
Exactly.
And it can have major impacts in that. Yeah. Anything else you guys want to say about kind of reincarnation versus endgame kind of conversation before we kind of move the conversation on?
I just, one more little note here about grinding and farming particular things. This is more towards the hardcore mindset. And I kind of want to branch because a lot of people are doing hardcore, especially returning players, because they don't know where to go. They don't have the situation where they already have, like, a guild or community on a particular server, and they just want to be someplace with level 1 characters and doing stuff where there's this a little bit more strong bond as opposed to necessarily on live servers. So on the live servers, I get a lot of people like, come on into the quest. If I have to carry your soul souls to the end, so be it. Where on hardcore, it's a different mindset. Like everyone is trying to get to the end of the quest. Everyone wants to be alive. So I've actually found quite a few new players and returning players, instead of playing on the live servers, have filtered into the hardcore. So you have like this weird hybrid between the reincarnation mindset and this in-game grind mindset that's kind of unique, that we don't really think about very often. But I feel like, especially going forward with, I believe, the hardcore server is going to be even more and more frequent in our DDO lives, that you're going to end up with this situation where you're going to need to have gear goals, and then you're going to have these, again, those watercress points that I talked about before, where the gear grind is going to be very real. So like, for example, again, Ravenloft, if there's one thing or one set that you're looking for, you may end up grinding really hard on a particular piece of gear. And those kind of things are really difficult and really time consuming when you're looking at something like the hardcore, because that's all temporary, right? You're talking 3 months and that guy gets shipped over to a different server or just straight up deleted. So you have to take that kind of stuff in consideration also, depending on your environment of hardcore versus live.
I think it's a great point, right? Because that hardcore is definitely going to be that kind of mix of the don't worry too much about the loot, pick up what you get along the way and kind of make it better, and that I need to go and get this set right now because I'm there, and it's going to be a massive jump in my survivability rate.
And you also have this other like little mini side thing that I think Patrick can talk about a little bit more than I can. But you take in, sometimes on the hardcore, for example, you're going to build a character, or a couple of characters, or a team of characters that will go and farm things.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's not what they're really for, though. They're really for this character over here that's going to be my real character. Right? Like,
yep.
And accidentally, I believe last year, Patrick's not real character ended up meeting all of the goals on the hardcore, right? You got your 5,000 favor and everything.
That was season 1.
Season 1.
It wasn't. That's kind of a perversion of what happened. It was more, I'm going to use this character to kind of get through some of the early stuff and kind of get a feel for what hardcore is like and feels like and what that experience is. Fully expecting that character to die along the way, and then I turned around and like, I'm at 3,500 favor. The thinking behind this character and what I'm doing with this character is now fundamentally changing of trying to keep it alive.
My point is I remember several times that you and I and your friend were farming certain quests for get gear for characters that were going to be your real character.
Yep.
And that is a very real mindset on the hardcore server, and one that you need to keep in mind.
That's also true of live too, though, I would say, right? Like, there are the time that my sorcerer tends to come out and play the most these days is, I want to go farm this item. And my sorcerer is still plenty capable of going and doing stuff on elite and sometimes even R1 to kind of solo farm some stuff just because he makes everything go boom. And I do that there on live as well.
I suppose that's true for,
that's kind of more of an end game thing.
High level stuff,
yeah.
Right? And I guess to me that's very separate, because you're talking about that kind of mentality taking place at level 6 as opposed to level 30.
Which is definitely a hardcore mentality as opposed to a live mentality. For sure, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for bringing up the hardcore. That's a great point to be in. So I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna end this show, and we'll continue this conversation talking about kind of more endgame and reincarnation specifically, and then probably a third segment we'll get more into specifics and where are some, if you're at this level range, hey, look at this set of gear and look at this set of gear. So that's kind of where I think this is gonna end up going. Arkat, you want to plug anything as we wrap the show up?
No, thank you. I don't stream or anything like that, so.
Except you join me on DDOCast Splat.
True.
Samius?
Oh, I would just point to again the Twitch and the YouTube and the Twitter and all that stuff at Samius Gurobo. It's a good way to get your questions asked and or answered and stuff like that.
All right, so thanks for listening to the show. Some actually some fun discussion going on in our chat right now. But also to my guests Arkat and Samus, and to all the contributors for DDOCast, and to Standing Stone Games and to Cyber Ears for hosting the podcast. If you'd like to support the show, you can visit our website, DDOCast.com, or you can support us on Patreon. If you have a DDO-themed webpage or you Twitch DDO and you'd like to be featured on our website, you can email us at ddocast@gmail.com. And you can hit us up at ddocast.com for show notes, MP3s, our calendar, previous shows, and other fun stuff. If you'd like to be a part of the show, if you have a comment on this episode, I'm sure there's a lot of people who have thoughts on gearing, or a question you'd like to hear us answer, or a topic you'd like to hear us discuss, or you just want to say hi, leave a comment or email us at ddocast@gmail.com. I'll say again, this whole discussion came from a comment that somebody left, so that's kind of why we're doing this. You can also find us on social media and follow us for latest cast updates at DDOcast on Twitter. So until next time, may all your attack rolls be crits, all your test level appropriate, have fun, and don't forget to gather for bus.